The deal in Frankfurt had been the hardest of my career. 6 days of late nights and endless negotiations that ended with a victory my boss had been chasing for 2 years. As my plane touched down back in the States, exhaustion clung to me, but so did a quiet pride. I had earned this. Every grueling hour, every sacrifice. Driving my rental car through the fading light, I turned down the familiar streets of Redwood Springs. Maple trees lined the sidewalks, their branches painted gold by the sunset. My parents' house sat at the end of the block, just as it always had, neat, steady, predictable. I had promised my mother I'd stop by before heading to my own apartment, and I knew she'd be waiting with a hot meal and 100 questions about my trip. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the bushes by the garage had finally been trimmed back, a small victory for my father. Smiling faintly, I grabbed the remote from my purse and pressed the button. The garage door rumbled open. Then my smile vanished. The space was empty. My heart dropped as my eyes searched the barren concrete floor. No gleam of polished black paint, no chrome shining back at me. My Dodge Challenger, my dream car, my treasure, the machine I had saved for 6 relentless years to buy, was gone. Only my father's lawnmower and my mother's gardening bins remained. "No," I whispered, the word tearing out of me. "No, no, no!" The remote slipped from my fingers and clattered against the ground. My suitcase thudded beside it as I stumbled toward the side door, my chest pounding with disbelief. Inside, I found them waiting. My mother, Linda, perched stiffly at the oak kitchen table. My father, Richard, sat with his rough hands pressed flat against the surface, eyes cast downward. And across from them, my younger sister Sophie, with her perfect makeup and carefully practiced posture, like she was preparing for a performance. The silence hit me harder than any words could. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. "Where's my car?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. Sophie lifted her chin, a confident mask plastered on her face. "It's just temporary. I'll pay it back. Every cent." My throat tightened. "Pay what back?" Richard shifted, his voice low, almost ashamed. "We took it to Summit Pawn. Got $45,000 for it." The room tilted. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "You did what with my car?" Sophie jumped in, her words tumbling out quickly. "It's just a loan against it, Claire, not a sale. I needed startup money for my cosmetics business. Once it takes off, I'll pay back the loan with interest, and you'll have your car back in no time." Her words hit me like glass shattering. My Challenger, the car I had dreamed of since I was a little girl in Grandpa Samuel's garage, the car I worked 70-hour weeks to afford, was gone. And worse, it wasn't strangers who had taken it from me. It was my own family. For a moment, the kitchen blurred around me, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint smell of roast chicken, even the sound of Sophie tapping her nails on the table. It all faded into the hollow roar of disbelief in my ears. "My car," I managed at last, forcing the words through a tightening throat. "You pawned my car?" Mom leaned forward, her tone dripping with that false sweetness she always used when she knew she was in the wrong. "Now, Claire, don't overreact. We did this for the family. Sophie just needed a chance." "A chance?" I stared at her, my voice rising. "You stole from me. You used my spare key. You forged my signature. That's not helping family. That's fraud." Dad flinched at the word, his shoulders curling inward. He still wouldn't look at me, as though staring at the grooves in the table could shield him from my fury. Sophie, however, sat straighter, her tone maddeningly calm. "Claire, it's not permanent. I've been working on my cosmetics line for months. This is the break I need. Once I launch, I'll pay everything back, plus interest. You'll get the Challenger back," I laughed. But it was a bitter, broken sound. Do you have any idea how many years I worked for that car? How many holidays I skipped? How many weekends I gave up? I didn't just buy a car, Sophie. I earned a piece of my life back. Her confidence faltered for the first time. She flicked her hair over her shoulder, but her eyes darted away from mine. You make good money at your job, Mom pressed, her lips thinning. You'll bounce back. Sophie needs this more than you do. Family helps family. The words scraped against me like sandpaper. Family helps family. How many times had that phrase been used to justify putting Sophie first? How many birthdays, graduations, and sacrifices had been brushed aside in her favor? I pulled my phone from my pocket as a notification buzzed. My insurance company, alerting me to a lien placed against the vehicle. Ice flooded my veins. This wasn't just about a loan. This was legal paperwork, filed under my name with a forged signature. I looked at all three of them, my hands trembling but my voice steady. You have 30 days, I said coldly. 30 days to get my car back. If you don't, I press charges for theft and fraud. Against every single one of you, Mom gasped. Charges? Against your own family? I met her horrified eyes without flinching. Family doesn't steal from each other. I turned toward the door, my footsteps sharp against the tile. Behind me, silence weighed heavy. Their shocked faces, the stunned betrayal. It was all background noise compared to the raw ache in my chest. For the first time in my life, I understood exactly where I stood in this family, and it wasn't beside them. Summit Pawn and Loan reeked of desperation and cheap air freshener, the kind of place where broken promises ended up behind glass cases, tagged with numbers instead of names. I straightened my blazer before walking inside, trying to look like someone in control, even though my stomach twisted with dread. My reflection in a dusty display case betrayed me. Red-rimmed eyes, a faint streak of mascara I'd missed washing away. The man behind the counter looked up, his name tag reading Frank Delgado. He had the expression of someone who had seen every kind of financial disaster pass through his door. Miss Monroe, he asked, pulling a file from beneath the counter. Yes, I said, my voice clipped. He slid paperwork toward me. Your vehicle was brought in 5 days ago. Loan amount $45,000, plus fees. I scanned the pages. My training as a financial analyst kicking in automatically. $3,000 in fees for less than a week. Predatory, even by pawn shop standards. And if the loan isn't repaid? I asked. Frank tapped a line of fine print. 35 days from the transaction date. After that, the vehicle goes to auction. Full payment required by October 3rd. $48,000 total. My pulse pounded in my ears. I flipped to the final page and froze. There it was, my name, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. I leaned closer, staring at the curve of the final E. Too straight, too stiff. My hand always curved upward at the end. A small flourish I'd never been able to unlearn. This was close enough to fool a clerk, but not me. This isn't my signature, I said, my voice low. Frank's expression shifted, discomfort flickering across his face. Ma'am, if you're suggesting fraud. I'm not suggesting, I cut him off, pulling my driver's license from my wallet. I set it beside the page, then slid out a recent work contract. Compare them. He leaned over, studying the signatures. His jaw tightened. I'll need to speak with my manager. Please do, I said, forcing my tone to stay calm. And while you're at it, pull the security footage from the day this transaction happened. I wasn't even in the country. I was in Frankfurt, Germany. Closing a deal 20 minutes later, his manager joined us with a grim expression. The truth landed like a brick in my chest. My parents had walked into this place, used my title, and forged my name. This is criminal fraud, the manager said quietly. We can file a police report right now, if you'd like. The word police lodged in my throat. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My own family, my parents, could be arrested, charged, sentenced. I need time to think, I managed finally. My voice sounded far away, even to me. When I stepped outside, the air felt colder, sharper, as though the whole world had tilted. I gripped the folder of paperwork until the edges dug into my palms. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about betrayal written in ink I never signed. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay in my apartment, staring at the ceiling. The pawnshop paperwork spread across the coffee table like evidence in a trial. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that forged signature, bold and cruel, mocking me. But the wound cut deeper than a single betrayal. This wasn't new. It was just the worst chapter in a story I'd been living since childhood. I remembered birthdays where Sophie's gifts sparkled under the tree, while mine came secondhand. I remembered high school nights when my debate trophies were tucked into a cabinet, but Sophie's participation ribbons were hung proudly on the fridge. I remembered Mom's voice saying, "Claire, you're the strong one. You don't need as much." They had always told me strength was my armor. What they never admitted was that they were using it as an excuse to give Sophie everything. The memories tangled with the present until I could hardly separate them. Sophie, sitting smug at the kitchen table, insisting it was just temporary. Mom calling it helping family. Dad, silent, his guilt written in the slump of his shoulders. And then there was Grandpa Samuel. I could still picture him in his garage, grease staining his hands, his laugh carrying over the hum of the old radio. He was the one who first taught me to love cars. He'd let me hold the flashlight while he worked on his Ford, telling me, "Machines don't lie, Claire. They give back exactly what you put into them." Not like people he had left me a small savings account when he passed, a nest egg he trusted I would use wisely. I had. I worked, I saved, I sacrificed. That Challenger wasn't just steel and leather. It was a piece of him, a promise fulfilled. And now my parents had pawned it off like a piece of junk in the garage. The anger burned hot, but beneath it lay something colder, clarity. This wasn't about Sophie's cosmetics business or my parents thinking they were helping her catch a break. This was about years of favoritism boiling over into a single, unforgivable act. I sat up, pulling the papers closer. 35 days. That was the deadline. If I didn't act, the car would be gone forever, sold to the highest bidder, and Sophie would move on to her next scheme while I was left with ashes. Number. Not this time. For the first time in years, I felt the steel in my spine. They had underestimated me. Again. And this time, I was going to make them regret it. 3 days passed before I went back to my parents' house. The October chill had settled in, and the maple trees outside burned with red and gold, their leaves falling like sparks from a dying fire. My heart pounded as I walked up the porch steps. This wasn't a visit. It was a confrontation. Inside, the familiar scent of cinnamon candles filled the living room. Sophie was sprawled across the couch with her laptop, chattering on her phone about launch parties and brand ambassadors. My mother hovered nearby, nodding like an adoring fan, while Dad sat quietly in his recliner, his eyes darting to me with unease. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I set the pawnshop folder on the coffee table with a thud. "We need to talk." Sophie rolled her eyes, hanging up her call. "If this is another lecture about the car, Claire?" "It's not a lecture," I cut in sharply. "It's a line. You forged my name. You committed fraud. That's not just wrong, it's illegal. You've got 32 days left before Summit Pawn sells my car. If that happens, I press charges." Against all of you, Mom's face paled. "You wouldn't dare." I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Try me." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Claire, she's your sister. You can't put her in jail." "I'm not putting her anywhere," I snapped. "She's doing that herself." "You handed her the shovel, and now you're surprised she's dug a hole." Sophie slammed her laptop shut. "God, you're so dramatic. I said I'd pay it back. I just need more time." "With what money?" I demanded. "Your startup hasn't made a single sale. You've blown through every dime you've ever had. And now you're blowing through mine." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the old wall clock. Finally, I stood, my voice low but steady. "I'm done being the family safety net. Either the loan is repaid in full before the deadline, or I go to the police. And this time, Mom, Dad, don't think they'll only charge Sophie. The signatures, the paperwork, the security footage. You're in it too. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Dad's face drained of color. Sophie's lips parted in a silent protest, but no words came out. I picked up the folder and tucked it under my arm. 32 days, I repeated. And then I walked out the door, leaving their stunned silence behind me. The cool autumn air hit my face as I stepped off the porch. For the first time, I didn't feel like the overlooked daughter begging for approval. I felt like someone who finally understood her own power. And I had no intention of giving it back. When the walls of your own home feel hostile, you look for truth elsewhere. For me, truth had always lived in my Uncle Raymond. He was my mother's older brother, a man who wore his years with quiet pride. Retired from the police force, he carried the kind of presence that didn't need raising his voice to command a room. His house sat on the edge of Redwood Springs, a modest ranch with a porch swing that creaked when the wind shifted. I drove there the next evening, the pawn papers heavy in my bag. Raymond opened the door before I even knocked, his lined face softening when he saw me. "Claire," he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. "Your mother called. Said you were being unreasonable." I let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what she told you?" He gestured me inside, nodding toward the worn recliner. "Why don't you start from the beginning?" So I did. I told him about coming home from Frankfurt, about the empty garage, about Sophie's smug insistence that it was just a loan. I laid out the paperwork, pointing to the forged signature, the repayment deadline, the threat of auction. My voice shook at times, but I didn't hold anything back. Raymond listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening as the story unfolded. When I finished, he sat back heavily, rubbing a hand across his chin. "Damn it, Claire," he muttered. "They've crossed the line this time." My throat tightened. "So I'm not crazy?" I keep second-guessing myself. Mom keeps saying family helps family. Dad just stares at the floor. And Sophie is a spoiled brat who's been coddled too long, he cut in, his voice sharper now. Your parents let her believe the world owes her, and now they've dragged you into it. Forging your name? That's not family. That's a crime. His words hit like a hammer and a bomb at the same time. I wasn't alone. I wasn't overreacting. "What do?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Raymond leaned forward, his eyes steady. "You hold your line. Don't let guilt soften you. You've got leverage now. The law, the deadline, the truth. Use it. If they think you'll back down, they'll walk all over you again. Make them feel the consequences." I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "And if it destroys the family," he sighed, the weight of his years in that breath. "Claire, family isn't supposed to destroy you first. If they can't respect you, then they've already broken what matters most." The room was quiet except for the ticking clock on the mantel. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt seen, understood. When I left that night, Uncle Raymond pressed my hand firmly. "Don't cave, kiddo. Make them repay every cent. Only then will they learn." As I drove home under the autumn stars, his words echoed in my head. Repay every cent. Yes, that was exactly what I intended to do. By the second week of October, whispers of Sophie's business launch were everywhere. Flyers cluttered coffee shop bulletin boards. Her Instagram flooded with glossy mock-ups of lipsticks and skin serums, all filtered within an inch of their lives. She called it Sophie Monroe Beauty, as though a fancy name alone could conjure success. But behind the curated posts and flashy talk, the cracks were showing. One afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house after work to find the living room stacked with unopened shipping boxes. Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, frantically tearing through them. The products looked cheap, flimsy, bulk-ordered knockoffs with labels slapped on crooked. She jumped when she saw me. "Don't start, Claire." "I'm busy." I folded my arms. "Busy digging your own grave?" Her cheeks flushed. "You don't get it. Influencers are already interested. I just need one viral post and everything changes. I stepped closer, picking up a poorly sealed jar of face cream. This? You think anyone's going to buy this? You pawned my car for dollar store junk with fancy stickers. She snatched the jar from my hand, her voice cracking. It's not junk. It's my future. I need more time. Her desperation clung to the air, thick and sour. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not the smug entitlement I'd faced in the kitchen, not the confidence of someone who believed the world would bend for her. This was different. This was panic. Mom swept in from the kitchen, her arms crossed. Claire, stop tearing her down. She's under enough stress. I turned on her, my patience frayed. She brought this stress on herself. And on me. 30 days, Mom. That's all I'm giving her. If the loan isn't paid back, I'm going to the police. Dad finally spoke, his voice weary. Claire, can't we work something out? Maybe extend the deadline? I pulled the pawn shop folder from my bag and slapped it onto the coffee table. No extensions. No excuses. The paperwork doesn't lie. October 3rd? Or I file charges. That's it. Sophie's hands trembled as she shoved products back into their boxes. Her mask of control was slipping piece by piece. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about the car anymore. This was about watching Sophie's world, the one my parents had endlessly propped up, start to collapse under its own weight. I almost pitied her, almost. The days ticked by like a countdown clock I couldn't silence. October 3rd loomed, each sunrise sharpening the weight of what I was about to do. Sophie grew frantic. Her once polished Instagram posts turned erratic. Late-night live streams begging for investors. Half-hearted product demos that drew more ridicule than praise. She called old high school friends, begged distant cousins for small loans, even tried cornering coworkers at her part-time cafe job with jars of face cream. It wasn't working. When I stopped by my parents' house that Saturday, the air was thick with tension. Sophie sat at the dining table, stacks of unopened bills scattered around her. Her hair was unwashed, her eyeliner smudged, her once perfect facade crumbling. Claire, she said the moment I walked in, her voice raw. Please, just a little more time. I'm lining up a real investor. I can pay you back. I swear I shook my head, setting the folder of pawn documents on the table. You're out of time, Sophie. This isn't just my car at stake. It's fraud. They forged my name. The pawn shop has security footage. The police would eat this alive. Mom slammed a pot down on the stove, spinning to face me. Do you even hear yourself? You're threatening to ruin your sister's future. Over a car, my laugh came sharp, bitter. It's not just a car. It's 6 years of my life. It's the only thing Grandpa Samuel left me. It's my name they forged, my credit on the line, my freedom at risk if this goes south. And you want me to roll over? Number. Not this time. Dad sat silently in his chair, rubbing his temples. For once, even he couldn't find the words to defend her. Sophie slammed her fists on the table, tears spilling down her cheeks. You're heartless. You've always hated me because Mom and Dad cared about me more. Well, fine. Go ahead. Call the cops. Destroy your family. You'll regret it when I'm gone. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she shoved back her chair, storming up the stairs with heavy, angry footsteps. A door slammed moments later. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mom's eyes burned with fury, Dad's with shame, but I felt only exhaustion. I'm not the one destroying this family, I said quietly. You are. By letting her believe she can do anything and never face the consequences, I picked up the folder, slid it back into my bag, and walked out. The autumn air hit me cold and clean. A reminder that outside their walls, the world still made sense. Inside, Sophie's world was October 3rd arrived like a gavel striking wood. I woke before dawn, my nerves buzzing. The pawnshop contract spread across my kitchen table beside a steaming cup of coffee. 35 days had passed since I found that empty garage, Now the reckoning had come. At 9 sharp, I drove to my parents' house. The curtains were drawn, the atmosphere inside heavy with dread. Sophie sat at the table in sweatpants, her hair a tangled mess. A pile of unopened packages, unsold cosmetics, loomed behind her like mocking evidence. Mom looked up first, her voice thin. "Claire? We just need a little more." "No," I said firmly, setting the folder down. "The deadline is today. The loan must be paid in full, or the challenger goes to auction. And if that happens, I file charges. Fraud, forgery, theft. I have everything I need." Dad shifted uncomfortably, finally sliding an envelope across the table. "We pulled money from our retirement. It's not the full amount, but..." I opened it. $20,000 in cashier's checks. Not enough, not nearly enough. I met his eyes. 48,000, that's the total. Anything less, and I walked to the police station. Sophie buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "I don't have it. I can't get it. Please, Claire, don't do this." But I only shook my head. "I didn't do this. You did." For a long, tense moment, the only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock. Then, with a heavy sigh, Dad pushed back his chair and disappeared into the study. He returned carrying a second envelope, his hands shaking as he set it beside the first. "That's the rest," he said hoarsely. "Your mother and I took out a loan against the house. You'll have your money, just don't send Sophie to jail." I stared at the envelopes, the weight of them pressing on my chest. It wasn't triumph I felt, not exactly. It was justice. I slid the papers back toward them. "Good, because this isn't over. You're going to sign a repayment agreement, drafted by my lawyer, binding Sophie to repay every cent you've just covered, with interest. If she defaults, she faces collections. Legally, no excuses, no more family safety nets." Mom's eyes widened. "You'd really put that kind of burden on your sister." "Yes," I said, my voice sharp as steel. "Because it's time she carried something for once in her life." Sophie looked up, her tears streaking her mascara, her expression broken. You're serious." I leaned closer, my gaze unwavering. "Dead serious." The room went still. Then, slowly, Sophie nodded. For the first time in years, she understood that the free ride was over. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of Summit Pawn and Loan, the crisp autumn air carrying the smell of fallen leaves. The familiar black Challenger gleamed under the weak sunlight, polished as though it had never been touched. My heart kicked at the sight. A piece of me finally returned. Frank Delgado, the manager, met me with paperwork in hand. "Loan repaid in full. Vehicle released back to the rightful owner, rightful owner." The words sank into me like a bomb. I signed the release with my real signature, bold, unshaken, and slid behind the wheel. The leather seat hugged me, the steering wheel familiar beneath my hands. For a moment, I closed my eyes, remembering Grandpa Samuel's voice. "Machines don't lie, Claire. They give back what you put into them." When the engine roared to life, it wasn't just a sound, it was a victory. Driving away from the pawn shop, I passed my parents' house. Curtains twitched as if someone was watching, but I didn't slow, not this time. They had already paid their debt, literally and figuratively. Uncle Raymond's advice echoed in my head. Make them repay every cent. And I had. Sophie was working now, a cashier's apron tied clumsily around her waist at the grocery store downtown. Part of her paycheck would go straight toward repaying Mom and Dad, who in turn had bound her to the agreement my lawyer drafted. She hated every second of it, but she was learning, slowly, painfully, that actions carry consequences. Mom still called sometimes, her tone brittle with unspoken resentment. Dad remained quiet, subdued, but I no longer answered to their guilt. The balance had shifted. For once, they understood I wasn't the expendable daughter, the reliable safety net they could raid whenever Sophie faltered. I was Claire Monroe, and I had made them all face the truth. as the Challenger's tires hummed along. The open road, I felt a weight lift from my chest. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming respect, about proving that my years of sacrifice meant something. In the end, justice hadn't come from the law or from shouting matches around the kitchen table. It had come from holding firm, from refusing to be broken, from demanding every cent back until they finally understood the cost of underestimating me. I pressed harder on the gas, the world blurring past, the car singing beneath me. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I wasn't angry. I was free. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.